Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session, What Next for Global Growth? I'm Marie Kemplay, the Investment Banking and Capital Markets Editor at The Banker magazine, and I'm really looking forward to moderating this discussion this afternoon. Really delighted to be joined by Mr. Jean Lemierre, Chairman of BNP Paribas, and of course, former President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So he is, of course, very well placed to address the issues we'll be talking about this afternoon. I'm not a big fan of long introductions from moderators, and we have a very short time for this discussion, so I'm keen to get to the questions. So, Mr. Lemierre, the title of this panel is, of course, What Next for Global Growth? But I think, firstly, maybe we should take a moment to reflect on some of the challenges that have made, well, this year so challenging for the global economy and how they might impact next year. So tell me, how do you expect the geopolitical climate to continue to impact the global economy in 2023?
Bien, bonjour. Don't worry, I'm going to shift to English. Well, we are in Paris, and it is the Conférence de Paris. Donc, my French is better than simply bonjour, huh? But you have understood. Your question is either extremely simple or extremely difficult. It depends a lot on your perceptions, stakes, personal history, understanding of the world. And perception may not be the same from Europe and from Canada or the United States. Maybe simple remarks. We are walking out an unprecedented difficulty, which was COVID. And COVID has brought a lot of questions. And one of them, of course, is supply chain. I'm in the business. I work with the corporate sector. And I can see how much the supply chain question is at the forefront of the debate. I don't know if it is what you have in mind when you speak about geopolitics, but supply chains, of course, difficulties come from COVID, and since the beginning of the year, from a war situation in Europe. So 2022 has been challenging because we had the supply chain question, COVID, and we continue to have supply chains difficulties, difficulties, and of course we have had a war situation. A word on this war situation. It's not going to stop. And from my point of view, 2023 is going to be continue to be massively impacted by this situation. And from a European point of view, this is key. It has a big impact, and I'm sure we shall speak about this. It has a big impact on many questions, notably the Ukrainians. We have a bank in Ukraine, and we employ 5,000 people in Ukraine, and we know well their situation, and it has an impact on the energy situation. It may have an impact on migration if we have a humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Of course, you may have in mind different crises, like Asia. We see the tensions. We see the difficulties, I would say, on the two sides of the Pacific. At the same time, we see reasons why leaders and people should try to manage these tensions. First, they meet. They have started meeting again, which is always good. Dialogue is always a positive element in the story. And of course, they have big challenges. Technology, cheap labor. I can share with you a remark made by a senior official to me, which is to say the West is highly dependent on cheap labor, which at inflation time is a serious question. At the same time, Europe has been probably too much dependent on Russian gas. So probably 2023 will be a review of all these dependencies and links and stakes. And I hope it will bring calm and wisdom and capacity to manage the tensions.
Okay, well, let's pick up pretty directly on what you just said there. You know, you mentioned earlier on in your remarks around supply chain issues. You've at the end there alluded to energy security challenges. For Europe, then, in that case, is there a need to forge or renew relationships with other partners, such as Canada and other parts of North America?
Well, I think Europe, of course, has a massive energy challenge. And we know well why. War situations are never good, sanctions are worse, and has a long-term impact, but also a short-term impact. Challenge for Europe was, to be sure, to be safe on the energy supply, and for the current winter, I hope it's the case, but life is longer, and we shall have again the challenge next year and the years after. So the lessons for Europe are quite clear. Mainly, it's about diversification, sources of supply. And to address your very specific question, Northern America is an obvious partner, the US and Canada. With maybe another question, because we are in Europe, we put together two questions, energy supply and the climate change question. And I'm always surprised by difficulties people have outside Europe to understand how much these two questions are linked together for the Europeans. We do believe that consuming less is good for security, but good for the planet, and emitting lower level of carbon is good for the same. So we are going to see, and you see day after day, many actions to reduce this. But one of them is needed, which is creating partnerships. And of course, the small difficulty there is in gas is shale gas. Gas is okay, shale gas little less compatible with ESG. Nevertheless, it's gas, and probably better than oil, and better than coal, and better than lignite. So gas will, for some time, drive more the partnerships than before, and everybody will look at this. But with gas goes a lot of questions, mainly like infrastructure. You need pipes, you need ports, you need liquefying equipment. So there's a big challenge, and just to build this very quickly. But definitively, I'm sure that in Europe, many countries, many companies are engaging across the Atlantic to try to build partnerships. I fully agree. Nevertheless, we have also to keep in mind that the cost of energy is an element of competition. And to be short, but hopefully clear with you, I hope that it will not be a massive source of competition and lack of common understanding. I shall not go any further, but it's clear that the current situation may create elements of cooperation. It may also create, if it is not well managed, elements of protectionism. Maybe I should stop here, no? Maybe. We are in the OECD, so I'm comfortable the OECD will take the lead about these questions.
Indeed. I might jump back to, though, the earlier part of your remarks, though, where you were saying there is something, if I can put it this way, of a cultural difference, potentially, if we park the competition issue for the moment. But I'm just curious, that cultural difference, as you were saying, around the understanding of the importance of climate change in relation to the energy security question, what barriers does that create for cooperation between Europe and North America?
There's no barrier. Why should there be any barrier? I think we may have a debate. I've put the remark on the table, about gas, shale gas, all these questions. But Europe needs energy. Views are not the same within Europe. The French will say, of course, yes, nuclear. Germany and some other countries will say the same. Other countries in Europe will say, nuclear never, not only Germany, but not only, and we should look at different sources. The truth is, we need to invest a lot into definitively nuclear and renewable energy. We need to do a lot, and there will be a transition phase. And in the transition phase, most likely Europe will need, of course, oil, hopefully less oil than before, and gas, hopefully less than before, but with safe sources of supply. And of course, it brings an obvious case for cooperation that I have no difficulty. When I go to the US, I didn't go to Canada over the last weeks, but I did go to New York and Washington. And you see that these debates are on the table and people work together to create cooperation.
Okay, I'm going to change tack slightly. We've been speaking a lot about a lot of the challenges that are facing the global economy. Let's switch and talk about actually what is making you feel optimistic for the global economy in the coming year.
Oh, optimistic. Well, I've said to you before the panel that I was rather optimistic. So maybe I should rephrase the word optimism. I think we have big challenges. We know which they are, and we have to work hard together to address them in as smooth as possible way. And this is definitively a challenge of the corporate sector and the financial sector. And this is a challenge for a bank like BNP Paribas. What do I mean by this? If I take a very high-level view, we have two questions. We have inflation and we have energy crisis. Inflation in the US, in Europe, we know why. It's the product of the fight against COVID, and it's the cost of the protection paid to people and to the business during COVID time. When you borrow money for no activity, you create inflation. This is textbook. No big surprise. But it is serious. And what we see is serious. And because it is serious, it's being addressed by central banks, both in Washington and in Frankfurt. They do the job. They fight against inflation. They do what they have to do. And when I listen to what they have said this week, they will continue to do it. Rightly so, I'm reassured, because they do the job. We know that fighting inflation and increasing interest rates may have an impact on the level of activity. Will it be big? Will it create recession? This is part of the debate. That's the point on which I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not too worried. I think the US will fight against inflation, will win, and maybe there will be a significant slowdown, maybe just below zero, okay? But they will rebound. When I look at the American economy, when I speak with my clients, I have no difficulty. There will be a significant, healthy rebound. In Europe, we have the same. I would like to add one point. When I look at the current situation, I begin to see massive cushions provided by governments. In Europe, when I try to add together all the decisions made by the German, the French, the Swedish, the Belgian governments and so on, I begin to have a total amount of money on the table to support people and the business, which is probably between 800 billion and a trillion, which is massive money, probably to be spent over 2 years. This is not science. This is a rough estimation. And at the end of the day, it does protect people because in Europe, the cost of energy, maybe some people say it's not enough. Nevertheless, it is on the table, and this is offering a massive cushion against recession. So most likely in Europe, even if we have two difficulties, it's quite the same. We are going to have a slowdown, hopefully an activity, a positive activity, not big, but nevertheless one. The key question will be the one I've mentioned for the US, which is how do we rebound after this? Okay. And probably the rebound is linked to a question in Europe, which is to find solution for the energy tensions. That's key. That's the European question. But that's the reason why I'm not pessimistic. I think we know what we have. We know what we need to do, and let's do it. The financial sector is, touch wood, healthy. Is a much better situation than in 2008. Of course, we see difficulties here and there. We have seen difficulties in the commodity business. We have seen tensions in the pension fund in the UK. We see, no big surprise, tensions in the cryptocurrency business. Fine. These are bubbles which have been created by the cheap money which was needed to protect people, and it has to be wiped off step by step. And we should not panic because we have this. This is not the symptom of a growing crisis. This is the symptom of a cleaning process. My English is not good and my words are not appropriate, probably, but you have understood what I mean. And we are going to know this. So we have to do it. Let's do it.
Okay, it's interesting you speak about that kind of transition phase in terms of tapering off the COVID-19 process. You also mentioned around there is actually a substantial amount of money on the table to support people within Europe to manage this period of years. I'm curious though, do you think there is enough money on the table in terms of infrastructure investment? Because we've spoken about the importance of investing in infrastructure to tackle this energy issue, as you have said. And I guess we could broaden that to think about digital infrastructure and other areas where infrastructure investment is needed.
Well, we should meet more together because you give me a fantastic point to say that there is behind these difficulties, which once more are serious, genuine. I do not say there's no difficulty. I say there are difficulties we know how to manage and to address, and notably if we pay attention to people. That we need to do. But at the same time, the current situation creates opportunities, but in a safe manner, notably for the Europeans, and probably in the US, to create new infrastructure, new energy, new ways of producing energy, exploring technology. One good example is hydrogen and ammonia today. A lot of work on this. This is really massive and good. And this will be definitively for Europe a source of growth, investing in the long and medium term. May have the same question for Europe and digital. Because I'm a banker, I like sources of growth, but then there is a question which is, how do you finance this? So everybody will say, look, you are going to print money, or to borrow money, and that will not be serious. I think it's not needed. Europe is a continent of savings. Europe exports saving, by the way, to the US. What we need in Europe is to channel a bigger part of the savings we have to these needs and to these investments. And this is a very serious job for governments, banks, asset managers, insurance companies, and so on, to team up with appropriate regulations to make sure that the savings we have are allocated in the normal way to notably the energy needs we have, or the infrastructure which is needed for energy. Can we do it? Of course, yes, we do it. I think we begin to see this, and it has to be continued. Probably it would be better if there were some guidance given by, I would say, the EU, whatever it is, the Commission or the Council, I don't know. But some clear guidance about what we want. But we have needs, we have the resources to address the needs, and that will be growth.
Great. Well, we are a little early, but I've been told we need to finish sharply, so I will end it there. Thank you so much, Mr. Lemier, for that interesting exposure of the challenges and the opportunities.